Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of GLAM Chats. I'm Ethel Villafranca, and I am a museologist, that is, someone who studies museums. I recently completed my PhD at the University of Melbourne, and my research, curated learning, explored teaching strategies of museums that school teachers can adopt in their classroom practice to help students engage on a deeper level with learning. I am also the curator of the Museum of Chinese Australian History here in Melbourne, Australia. So I have been working with museums and libraries since 1998. But whenever I speak to other gallery, library, archive, or museum practitioners or glamours, I always learn something new or find something that is different from my own experience or studies. So I find that pretty exciting. And so I thought, why not invite GLAM friends and colleagues from different parts of the globe so we can talk about the work that we do, the various pathways we've taken to get to where we are in the GLAM world. And these conversations are more about the individuals, but of course, we'll still talk about the institutions that they are part of. If you're not a glamour, no worries. This is a perfect opportunity for you to ask us any questions you have about galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. So drop them in the comments below and we'll try to answer your questions. Don't be shy. Remember, there are no silly questions. So for our third episode, we are chatting with certified bibliophile and amazing glamour, Justine Hanna. Justine has over 10 years of library experience working in areas of information services, reader development, local history, adult literacy, outreach, and programs. She completed her master's in librarianship at Charles Sturt University in Australia and is currently team leader, Sam Merrifield Library and Customer Engagement at Moonee Valley Libraries. She is a proactive member of the GLAM community here in Melbourne. Justine is a founding member and inaugural president of New Cardigan. I love New Cardigan. It's a social professional group with the goal to, listen to this, make GLAM workers more awesome, right? How cool is that? So she also co-founded the Melbourne Library Service podcast, Dear Reader, and runs her own podcast, Literary Elixirs, where she pairs books with food and drinks. If that's your thing, tune in. This is one very busy librarian. One last thing that I wanted to say, Justine is one of the people who inspired me to do GLAM Chats. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Justine Hanna.
Hi.
Justine.
Hi.
Joining me.
Oh, it's so wonderful. Thank you for that beautiful introduction as well. I am blushing.
Well, it's all true. We will talk more about New Cardigan because I really want to talk about that, what you put together there, what you started with a group of your friends, glamours. But before that, I wanted to ask you first to talk for you to talk about your museum. Tell us about what you do. What's a regular day like for Justine?
Sure. So my role is currently, as you said, team leader and customer engagement at Moonee Valley Libraries, which means I manage the Sam Merrifield Library branch and I work on developing and delivering programs and outreach to do with customer engagement. A typical pre-COVID day sees me at work by 8:30 a.m. and I would usually attend to any emails that had come through, prepare for any 9:30 a.m. meetings, or I might be on the desk shift from 8:30 till 11. So I would then be out on the floor getting ready to open. My days usually involve a lot of meetings with staff, with library leaders, with other council departments or community organisations, mostly around programs and partnership development. I would also be dealing with any facility management issues that might come up. So if the heating or cooling isn't working or a light is flickering, I'd be the one to usually deal with that. I would also be managing the roster, which is done in a really great online system about 6 weeks in advance. But often meetings come up, staff is sick or something happens and I need to adjust it, find cover or do whatever is needed to ensure we always have staff in the public space. And of course, I still need to do my 2-hour shift in the public space as well. So days get filled up really, really quickly.
And Moonee Valley libraries. So Sam Merrifield, the photo of which we see here, is just one of how many libraries?
Yep, so there's 5 libraries in Moonee Valley. So there's Sam Merrifield in Moonee Ponds. Sam Merrifield was a prominent citizen who put some money towards a new library. So that's why it's named after him. We have a photo of him in the library as well. And there's also Ascot Vale Library, which is our smallest branch, but it's so lovely and it's in a beautiful building and the community really adore that library. We have Nidri Library. We have Avondale Heights Library, which is the newest one. It's only 5 or 6 years old now. And we have Flemington Library too, which is another older building in the main drag there in Flemington. And yeah, they're all really wonderful branches with different personalities and really supporting the community they sit within.
And you've given us a list of all the things that you do. And like most GLAMers, we always have a long list of things we have to do that some people find unexpected in our title as curator or librarians. But can you tell us what you find as the most fulfilling aspect of working in the library?
Absolutely. Oh man, there's so many things actually, but I love when I can encourage and empower my staff to try something different. So to try new ways of reaching out to the community, to try to reach out to people who never come to libraries and help them learn about all the good stuff we have to offer. Several of my staff have come up with some amazing ideas for a program or activity that really puts the library out into the community. So one of my favorite examples is we often need to get rid of items from the shelves. I know, shock horror. We call it weeding, like you would. You get rid of the older, ugly things that you don't want so you can make space for the new good stuff. But some of these items are actually still in pretty good nick. And one of my staff came up with the idea to call them pre-loved books and to place them in local cafes or similar community spaces for people to read, to take home if they wanted to. Obviously, it's not something we're doing now, but I love that initiative. It's all about community, accessibility, sustainability, and I'm really just so proud of my staff member for coming up with that idea in the first place. So really, I love that ability for me to say yes to my staff. I've got other examples, but I won't go into those. But another one of my favorite things to do is to host an event. So, picture of me hosting an author talk there. But yeah, whether it's an author talk like this one was or one of our slightly different reader engagement events, we've run a number of really fun events in the library space where we worked with our economic development team at council to connect with local businesses. And we've run book matching events with local cheesemonger, wine shop, beer seller, gelati shop, tea lady. So much fun, those events, because we run them in the library space and no one expects to be able to taste cheese or wine or any of these delicious things actually in the library. And then we use our expertise as librarians to pair books with each of the cheeses or wines or whatever. And I love just chatting to people who come and to our author talks as well, hearing them talk about reading or the library. It's just one of the best things and I really, really miss it. I really miss it.
So I find it really fascinating that the stereotype of libraries and librarian have just been, at least for me and, in a lot of places have been completely, changed. Libraries are not just places where you borrow books or you go to read books where you have to be quiet. You mentioned having cheese and wine in library, having engagement with the public, talks and all. It's more of a community hub these days, isn't it? And I just love that. I was reading an article the other day about how some libraries here in Victoria have reached out to vulnerable members of the community by calling them they call members, about 7,000 members, their librarians, when the library, because in Victoria, we are under lockdown, so we're not allowed to go to work. And one particular library sent home their librarians with phone numbers of their members, and they started calling them one by one, mostly the vulnerable ones. They started with the vulnerable ones, but they practically called everyone, all 7,000 members, just to check on them, just to chat with somebody. And I love that about GLAM institution, that we are not boxed into what our traditional roles are. Anyway, so will you share with us the path that you took that led you to this current role? Did you always want to be a librarian?
No, actually. That's funny. I haven't been asked that in a while. I just wanted to quickly touch on the story that you just shared. That was Yarra Plenty Library Service, and it is an amazing initiative. They only called anybody who was age 70 plus. And because they recognize that particularly in their demographics, there was a large number of those people, and those people are far more isolated than others because their accessibility in terms of technology is potentially less so as well. So yeah, really, really interesting too, because it brings up issues around privacy and people's data, but we won't go into that today. I'm sure they did all the checks and balances there. But yeah, it's a really, really wonderful thing. And yeah, libraries have been community hubs for such a long time now, but it feels like people are starting to understand that slowly. But yes, your question. So I went from high school, not really knowing what I wanted to do, to study a Bachelor of Arts at Monash University. And I loved that. I loved it so much I did an honours year as well, so I did 4 years. And then Bachelor of Arts, really doesn't get you much, does it, except a really broad understanding of the world. But I decided to go overseas for what was supposed to be a year, and live and work in England, and what ended up being just over 4 years. I was working in hospitality, and I really learned a lot about customer service and managing staff from that experience. I ended up managing a restaurant, which was in a 400-year-old building, and it was just stunning and really hard work, but I learned a lot from it. And so then I came home in 2007 and didn't know what I wanted to do. Did the thing that everyone does, which is horrible, but I was like, I like books. I like reading. Maybe I should go to the library. So I actually went to my local library and I spoke to the librarian there and talked to him about what he does. And he very quickly disabused me of the notion that you get to read books all day. But he said how wonderful it was and how much he enjoyed it, and really encouraged me. And so then I called ALIA, which is the peak body here in Australia, and asked them what I would need to do, and told them what my previous degree was. And I was able to, basically within 2 weeks of landing back in Australia from England, I was able to go back to Monash University and start studying a graduate diploma at the time of information and knowledge management. So yeah, I loved the study, and I also managed to get a job as a library officer at one of the libraries on campus too, which was a fabulous experience. And I was just really eager. I really liked the academic library, but I was really eager to get into public libraries because that really appealed to me as a space where I could make a difference to a community. Just as you're saying now with Yarra Plenty and as a hub, I really could see that even then in that would have been 2008 at that point. The GFC hit, that was tough. But I managed to get some casual work.
Yeah. What is GSD?
GFC, the Global Financial Crisis, which is what we call it in Australia. And that was a really tough time for finding work anywhere. I was super, super lucky to have some casual work at both the Monash University Library and Monash Public Library. So that was really lucky. And then I managed to land a full-time job at Burundara Library Service, my first full-time job as a fully qualified librarian, and it was a community development librarian role. That role was so interesting. It had 4 people in it in a 2-year period, and it had basically left the role quite undefined. So I got to make it into whatever I wanted it to be, and it was a really great place to learn the basics of librarianship in a public space. I was able to set up programs such as the English Conversation Clubs, which they didn't have, but Chinese population, the demographic in Boroondara was actually quite high. So that was a really great program, and they're still running it to this day, which is wonderful. And in that role, I was also responsible for transitioning the Boroondara Literary Awards into the library portfolio. And then I ran those awards for the next few years, liaising with the Rotary Club, who were the major sponsor. And that was just such a great grounding time and a great opportunity for me to grow as a librarian. But after 5 years there, I wanted to change things up. And so I applied to work at the then new library at the Dock for Melbourne Library Service. I was the reader engagement and local history librarian there, and then also at the Kathleen Syme Library and Community Centre when that opened a year later. It was at Melbourne that I had some amazing opportunities to act in higher level roles, but also to work with different spaces and people that you would not normally expect in a library. For example, the library at the Dock has a really lovely gallery space, and part of my job was to work with the gallery curator to plan library events around the exhibitions. With the local history part of my role, I was involved in setting up a history group in Docklands. And then after moving to Kathleen Syme Library in Carlton, liaising with the local history groups there and developing programs and events with them. We also supported the Snapped photography competition, which ran biannually and is a wonderful opportunity for any budding photographers out there. And one of the acting roles I took on was team leader for the literacy and learning team, which meant I was responsible for a lot of the adult programs and events, but also was the coordinator for the Lord Mayor's Creative Writing Awards, which is just a brilliant writing competition and seems to keep on getting better every year. And it was at Melbourne, and I can see you've got that cheeky photo there too, that I was inspired and supported, which was a very important part of it, to create the first podcast by a library service in Australia, which was focused on the reader as listener and wasn't just a recording of an author talk. So that's Dear Reader, and that's myself and my colleague, Natalie Nason. And it was just a truly wonderful experience. The management there was so supportive of the idea. They gave us whatever we needed, and we had a lot of fun chatting about books. We had other librarians as guests. We had authors as guests, booksellers. It was a really fun way to start my podcasting career. I also decided to do my master's just after I started working at Melbourne Library Service. And I went through Charles Sturt Uni for a bunch of reasons, including the cost of it all and the need for me to study online, as it would have been difficult for me to get to classes at that particular time. And I really liked what I knew of their online learning system. And I knew I would also need support when I was studying. So the team at CSU just seemed really supportive. They were led by the lovely, lovely Mary Carroll. And it was just a really positive experience. I will confess it was some of the toughest study I've ever done, possibly because I'd been away from study for some time. So that was 2014. And then in 2015, I also co-founded the group New Cardigan, which is, yes, as you said earlier, a brilliant space for anyone interested in the GLAM sector at all. Just check it out. I'm going to give them a plug. Head to newcardigan.org. We were just a bunch of friends and colleagues who wanted a group which was for us. And we didn't really see us in ALIA or VALA or any of those older, more established and traditional organizations. New Cardigan was originally aimed at mid-career professionals who might be getting a bit jaded and in need of a community of practice to support them, inspire them and empower them to JFDI, as we say. If you listen to the podcast, you'll know what that means. I also started the podcast CardiCast, and we ran events every month and started a blog club. So there's so much good stuff, and they are still going strong. Without me on board as president, I stepped down last year, but they're doing some great things. And if you aren't already a member, go check them out, join in the fun. It's really fabulous as a group. And we can talk more if you'd like about that as well. But just to wrap up about my career, my acting role at City of Melbourne was finishing up. It was a maternity leave secondment. And I realised I had absolutely loved being a team leader. Supporting and guiding staff was actually something I was really good at, and I enjoyed it. And so I started looking around for a permanent team leader role. And I was very lucky to see this one that I'm currently in at Moonee Valley Libraries. The team is amazing here. The culture is great. And I've been here for 3 years.
Okay, that's a lot. I want to go back to some of the parts. First, I was stalking your LinkedIn profile, and then I saw that you worked, and you mentioned this, so I'm not, forget about the stalking. You mentioned it also, that you work for the Kathleen Syme Library. That's a very beautiful, elegant library in terms of the building, right? And we'll talk more about the built structures of libraries in a little while. But then I also want to talk about the fact that the things that you do, that you've told us, many of those go beyond processing book, like cataloging book, processing return borrowed books, putting them back on the shelf. So it totally breaks that stereotype of librarians as, quiet types, um, happy with surrounded by books, and want their libraries to be quiet and very, ordered and organized. Well, organized, yeah, I can understand that. But I find that really interesting. And where do you learn all this, public programming, how to select public program, how to put together public programs or public engagement? Do you learn that in school? Where did that come from? Where did that skill get developed?
On the job, honestly. I loved my librarianship studies. I had very few bad experiences, but I will say that it's a lot of what I learned way back then, things have changed, I don't really feel is relevant to what I do now. But I've been in libraries for a long time. That study was quite a while ago. So no, I wish I had done project management, and I did do that in my master's actually, because I thought that would be useful. I wish I had done something around engaging the public. That would have been a really useful skill set for me now. It's easy to engage people when they're already in your branch. It's when you're trying to engage the people that aren't coming in, and you want to know why, how to reach them, and then just share all the good things with them. That's actually a really, really difficult thing to do. And running programs and events, knowing what programs are going to work, all of that is just feeling your way, because every community is different. So as I mentioned with the Burundara Library Service, when I got there was really a very undefined role, which was great. I got to make that role whatever I wanted it to be. And so super lucky in the first instance. But I noticed that there was this huge demographic that was being underserved. And I knew other libraries had got English conversation clubs or some form of that. So I was like, well, why can't we? So I basically had to figure it out on my own. And I did that by reaching out and communicating and talking with other people who had done similar things, doing my research. And I basically put a call out for volunteers, ex-teachers, people that had the time and the capacity to teach English skills, but I wanted it to be more informal than actual classes. So that's why it was called the English Conversation Club. And because different volunteers had different levels of skill in that regard. So at the time I was like, I just need anybody, but everyone had to have the police checks and whatnot. And that was a whole process that I was really supported with there, because they have the Burundara Volunteer Resource Centre, and the staff there were just amazingly supportive and really coached me through all of that. And then, getting the people to come in and participate. And it just went gangbusters from the beginning. It was super popular all the time. And I'm really proud of that. It's such a simple program, but it was a response to a community need. And that was why I wanted to be in public libraries in the first place. I made a difference to that community. And I'm sure I've done other things that have made a difference to communities, but that one being so early on as well, I don't know, it's always stuck with me.
I must say that growing up, I had this perception of librarians as scary, strict, with no sense of humor kind of person, because I guess that's how they're normally portrayed, right? And it didn't help that when I was at uni, we had the head librarian in our faculty was nicknamed, get this, Conan the Librarian. And she did live up to that name in many, many occasions. In fact, she made one of my friends cry. I don't know why. We were borrowing books from the reserved section, and then she just, left the room in tears after the librarian spoke to her. However, I know she's a lovely person, wonderful person in real life, because I met her outside of the library. So I know she's an awesome person. But the people that I've worked with and have met since I started working for museums and libraries are just some of the most wonderful, compassionate, kind, smart, intelligent people that I know. So just shout out to the former staff members of the Robinson's Children's Library who are watching right now. And if there's anyone here from Lopez Museum and Library, hello. So I just wanted to, and speaking of stereotypes, so New Cardigan, I love New Cardigan. I was introduced to this organization by by a librarian who was then the project manager of the research group that I was part of. And she told me, "Oh, join this," because I was the only museum person, and I was new in Melbourne. I was the only museum person in the research group, and she told me, "Oh, check this out." And I was just wowed at the fact that how inclusive it was. I mean, you mentioned this in you said this earlier, that you reached out to the community, other librarians, other practitioners. And what I find really heartwarming and intriguing about New Cardigan is the fact that it's a very inclusive, active community of glamours, and it's very rare for us to find organizations that are not in silos. So you have the museum associations, the archivists, you have the librarians, but this one, it's a combination of glamours, and you do have, and you guys can see on the screen the diversity of the programs that you guys run. It's amazing. And how did that come about? You mentioned that you came up with that with a bunch of other friends, and I have to applaud you for that because it's just amazing.
Well, it came about actually, and if you go onto the New Cardigan website, there is a timeline under the About tab, and it does sort of give you an overview of the first 3 years. I'm not sure if it's been updated since then. But yeah, the origin story is that about 5 of us had all worked together at Burundara. And then we'd all gone our separate ways, and we'd got other jobs elsewhere, and we really wanted to reconnect. And so we organised drinks. We were at the Arbory in the city when we could actually go out, which was a great memory. And we were just having some drinks and food and chatting and just having those wonderful moments where you learn about what other people are doing, and it sparks off ideas and thoughts. And we were all like, oh, why isn't there a space for this? And, the conferences and the mini, conferences and things that happen in Libraryland are great, but they don't really allow the space for that kind of water cooler chat in a way. And the sort of serendipitous connections that you can make. And so, yeah, we just had this great discussion about what would we do if we could, create our own alia or whatever. And we literally were throwing around names. I still like Beyond Buttons, but I was overruled. Yeah, it was a really fun conversation. And then Hugh Rundle, who is a wonderful, wonderful human, I went to bed. I was like, yeah, that was great fun. Woo! We had all this wonderful idea. And then I woke up the next morning and there was a Twitter handle and an e-newsletter all ready to go. And a month later we had our first event. So you can't say anything around that man. And yeah, he and I, out of that original group of 5, he and I are the longest. In fact, technically, he's the longest running Cardi Core member because I have stepped back, although of course I'm there to support whatever that group does. But yeah, it's really a fabulous organization. We started small and we really wanted to be broad because when libraries are great. I love libraries, but when libraries get siloed, and we do have that issue in the GLAM sector at large, but libraries, we get siloed and we get boring and we get jaded, and we really need the input from the other sectors, the galleries, archives and museums. And I like to put an R on the end and say records or research, so we're glamorous. But yeah, there's just so much out there that can really inform what we do as a whole, and our community yes, we're about books, but we're actually about so much more than that. And what we're about is connection. We're about the health and well-being of our community. And sometimes that's through education and sometimes that's through entertainment. But we can do all of that so much better when we're actually part of this broader group. So yeah, that was sort of the original ethos of New Cardigan, and it's grown wonderfully. There's a Perth chapter. We've had one I think international guest who visited from Canada, Missy DeMeo, and we've done a lot of good stuff, and they're still doing some great stuff, and it's a pleasure to have been involved and to still be involved.
And I need to point this out. New Cardigan does not have membership fees. So and aside from the fact that it's across different GLAM professions, you also have activities where you have a lot of regular activities that are happening, not just the monthly. It used to be monthly, the Cardi party until COVID, and we get to go behind the scenes. I mean, and it's very informal, and I say that in a really positive way, because we do attend conferences that are museum conferences or other professional conferences, but most of the time we're fixated on, oh, I have to attend these sessions. It's more of work. This one is just fun with a lot of learning involved, because being able to go behind the scenes in some of the institutions that like libraries and museums, art centers, it doesn't compare. And again, if you're from Victoria, it is free. So sign up and join the fabulous, fantastic New Cardigan. Now I'm going to move on. I've been flashing comments from people who are watching. Thank you for sharing your comments, everyone. And there's a question here that I wanted to highlight. Well, I can just find that. Did I yeah, there. Vanessa wanted to ask a quick question about what you do to keep yourself and your team motivated.
That's a great question. And I think pre-COVID, I would have answered it slightly differently to what I would say now, because it's harder now, for sure. But in a way, it's easier too. Oh, I'm not making much sense, am I? Okay, so what do I do to keep myself and my team motivated? I think about the value that we bring, and you can do that in a lot of different ways. Right now, we are still answering phones. So occasionally I will answer. I'll have a couple of hours where I'm answering the phone as well. And when we were in stage 3 restrictions, we were able to actually post out books to people. So we called it reuniting reserves. So we had them, people could reserve items. We would go into the libraries at specific times, socially distant and wearing all the PPE. And then we would pull the books from the shelves, pop them into the AusPost boxes and get them sent off to people's houses, which was such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful project. When we couldn't do much else, we could at least get people books, and we put colouring in sheets in there, and we could do DVDs as well, and whatever they wanted, really. And so getting the phone calls when people received those and getting all the comments online, that has been a really, really useful resource in a ways to remind ourselves when we're working from home now that that we are still valued by the community. And pre-COVID, I would probably be looking at, okay, how are we making an impact? Moonee Valley Libraries does a wonderful, well, Moonee Valley Council, I should say, does a wonderful thing. Their focus in their council plan is the health and well-being of the community. It's very, very simple. That has to be the heart of anything that we do. And so when you're looking at programs, when you're looking at the collection, when you're looking at any aspect of the library, customer service, the health and well-being of the community being the very, very center, I think that makes it very, very clear to the staff and to me that we're valued. We value our people, but we're also valued for what we can bring. And that helps us stay motivated too, knowing that we are delivering a really important service for a lot of people. But yeah, it can help.
And it also really makes sense. I know this might sound, a bit petty, but when people take the time to actually tell us the difference we make or just say thank you, it makes our lives so much easier. That, oh, I may not be making a massive change in the community, but for that one person we made a difference. So if your library, your museum, your archive made a difference, or you're grateful for them, send them a message. It's a quick 2 second, 3 minute. I don't know how long it takes you to write a message, but we'd love to hear those things. And it also gives us more ideas on which ones are working, because not we don't all the time collect surveys or visitor feedback. And these things, they inform us on what else we would spend our time and resources on.
Yeah.
Now,
When we do events, just quickly, I'll mention we would often ask the people to fill in surveys, and people don't like to do that at the end of an event. They just want to go, they're done. But I would often say, and I found when I explained it, it worked, people would follow through, that your feedback actually means that we know we're on the right track. We can prove with a physical thing to our bosses and the people that have the money bags that this is a program worth continuing. So, don't slash our funding, don't cut the budget and things like that. And so it's a bit different now in terms of the fact that we don't have the physical events and we don't have the hard copy necessarily. But anytime we get any kind of feedback, we make a note of it, we save it. It's a very, very useful resource for us. It doesn't just make us feel good, although it makes us feel great, because you always get the bad feedback. You never hear the good stuff. And the good stuff is so important for that motivating side of things, but also for the upstairs people,
Yeah. So I'm sure you get asked this often, about being a librarian who deals with books every day, every single day. What is your favorite book?
I think that is such an interesting question to ask a reader and a librarian. I have many, many, many favorite books, depending on what mood I'm in. And sometimes I will be totally in love with a book for a few months, but then another one will come along to take its place. I do have a favorite, which when pressed, I do tell people. I have read it more than 40 times in my life, and I still love it, although it's probably only number one because of its longevity. But The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I am well aware of its lack. Tolkien really did not know how to write women well at all. But I love the world building and the themes of friendship and triumph through hardship. I love that he created his the Elvish language, and people go and sing lays in Elvish at his tombstone every year. There's just so much that I love about that book. I wish they consulted me over the movies, but you can't have everything. But right now, and I can see it popped up on the screen, I am loving light and fun reads. So I would absolutely recommend Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I stayed up until 1 a.m. reading it. It was so much fun. If you have read Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, who I just saw this morning in a Melbourne Writers Festival event too, I'll add. It's very similar, really snazzy romp, light and fun, but with a heap of heart. So definitely recommend those. I've been loving The Flatshare and The Switch by Beth O'Leary. They're lovely, fun, light books, and they just have enough depth to keep you going. They're not just fluff. So I think that's really important to me anyway, as a reader. Uprooted and Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik are another two books that I always recommend. They're huge favorites of mine. So different from what you'd expect them to be. They have a sort of fairy tale myth base, but they go somewhere completely different, and they have really strong female characters. And I always recommend Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. It's a really great time right now, I think, to learn more about our First Nations people. And then there's Talking to My Country by Stan Grant, Talking Up to the White Woman by Aileen Morton Robinson. These are all things I recommend. But right now, I'm actually reading How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. They're also on your screen. All about resisting the attention economy. So far, it's been a good read. Nonfiction, I find it, I need a little bit more quiet time and a bit more structured time to actually sink my teeth into it. So I haven't gotten terribly far in it just yet. But I'm one of those people that has multiple books on the go in multiple formats. So I will stop now. But if you want to do literary elixirs, just literaryelixirs.com. There's a lot of books. Oh, look at you go, Ethel. There's a lot of books that I have recommended, and there's also authors and librarians that I've had as guests have recommended some as well. So yeah.
I must say that those two books that we had, the covers, shown, they have really interesting titles. How to do nothing. Like it's a bit hard these days not to do well. Not it's a bit hard to feel like you don't have to do anything these days. It's
Exactly. And that's the point
it's a
of,
very close time. And then boyfriend material. Okay, I'm not gonna talk about that. But head on to Justine's blog, literary website, Literary Elixirs, and you have been pairing books with food and wine. Why wine? Why cheese?
oh, look, it's actually just books with anything. So those events that I spoke of a while back that we ran in the library, they were so fun. And I just kept thinking to myself, this would be great as a podcast. So earlier this year, February this year, I actually just went to my local, I'm a bit of a cheese fan. So I went to my local cheesemongers and I went to the local breweries. I live in Brunswick, so I'm walking distance from a number of amazing little microbreweries when we were allowed to. Yeah, I just went and spoke to people about the business and got them to talk to me about the whatever it was, the cheese, the beer, the wine, whatever. And then I would match books to those cheeses or whatever. And it was just a super fun thing to do. The whole idea for me of this kind of like event or podcast or, just the idea is it's around getting people to understand that reading, you don't have to stick, just because you like romances doesn't mean that that's the only thing that you'll like. There are so many books out there. Just because you're a true crime fan doesn't mean that you won't like a romance. If there's a good kind of element of crime in there, or maybe it's character driven, maybe it's maybe you like a particular kind of setting or something like that. I just feel like sometimes people pigeonhole themselves in terms of what they like to read, and I don't like doing that to myself, and I don't like people doing that either. So yeah, it's just a way to broaden the reading experience and to really maybe hammer home a bit the idea that reading is something that everybody does in some format or other, whether you just read websites and web articles or you read nonfiction, fiction, whatever, audiobooks, ebooks, it's all reading. And I just think not enough people think about it in the sense that it's an experience. It's not sitting in a corner with a lamp and your book. There's a whole lot around the reading experience, and so this is my way to try to broaden that for people.
And in the beginning, you mentioned you go to breweries, you go to shops, tea shops. Now that we are under lockdown, you're still doing it, and you have one episode per week or so. Where do you find the time? Oh my god!
It doesn't take that long once you get into the swing of it. And these days, since March, April, I've basically been talking to authors and librarians. Obviously, small businesses have a lot on their plate. And as much as I'd love to get back to chatting with them, it's harder to do over Zoom or Skype or whatever platform you're using. But authors and librarians are really happy to chat, thank goodness. So I've been able to keep going. And it's just been really super fun. It's forced me to read so many more books as well, where I would normally possibly be in a reading slump, because there's a lot going on and there's this weight and you still have to work and all of this stuff. But it's probably one of my sanity checks, to be honest. And that's why I still do it, because even if I don't have a guest, I've had one week where it was just a hard week for everybody and no one was feeling it. And so I just did a very short comfort reads episode, and it was fun. And it reminded me of some books that I love, and rereading is something that I love doing. I know not everybody rereads, but for me, it just helps to go back into a book where I know the ending's happy and I know the journey is too rough.
Wait, hang on. That comment about happy ending just reminded me of that. I'm an odd book reader in that if I'm reading fiction, and this is will raise some eyebrows. If I'm going to, before I read a fiction book, I would look at the back and read a few pages of the ending, and see if I like the ending, then I'll pick it up and then read it. Like, so no spoiler. No, I don't get bothered. Same with most movies. I don't get bothered by endings, spoiler alert and all that. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I do that too. I do that too. Not all the time, but definitely, especially if I'm like, oh, I know the journey. I want to know the ending. Or sometimes I know the ending and it's the journey that's important and how the writer gets to the ending. There's very few books that surprise me in that way. And I love it when they do. I love it when they do. But yeah, I have no problem with that at all.
And it makes me more engaged with the material because I know how it will end, and I know I want to find out how they will get there, and how they write about how these characters will get. I get so invested in the characters I'm reading. They seem so real to me. But moving on from books, let's talk about library buildings. So again, community hub libraries are community hubs, but they're also, in terms of their built structure, there are just some really beautiful libraries. And whenever there are, I have friends visiting Melbourne, I would always, always, always bring them to the state library, if only to show them the dome room. It's beautiful. It's probably one of the most iconic, photos of the library. I mean, photos taken of the State Library of Victoria is, the dome room, and that the tables in the at the bottom, at the ground floor. But outside, beyond that, the hallways, they're just so beautiful. And in New York, there's also the Morgan Library and Museum, which is another one. It's so the State Library is very, I guess, minimal in terms of, it's white pillars. The Morgan Library, on the other hand, it has elaborate ceilings, elaborate painted, massive tapestries with a huge fireplace in one of these rooms. Do you have favorite libraries?
Oh, yes, absolutely, I do. Excuse me, one of my cats has decided to come up onto the table, so I'm like, stay away from the laptop. You mentioned Kathleen Stein Library before. I absolutely love that particular library, and I was privileged enough to be the team leader managing that branch for some time. And geez, it was such a beautiful space. I really love it. It's still my favorite library in Melbourne. Even though I do love where I work too. It's a totally different feel though. But yeah, there's a lot of history at the Kathleen Stein Library. But I've done a lot of travel, and as a lot of librarians do this, I think we basically go to libraries in other locations, and I have loved so many. One of my favorites is the Amsterdam Public Library, the Central Branch. It's enormous. It's 7 floors. It's huge. They've got art throughout. They've got music. They've got a theatre. They can have like 1,000 people in there. It's just an amazing space and really, really wonderful, vibrant space. Toronto as well, the public library there, spectacular, similar kind of thing. This huge, airy, not like 8 floors or whatever it was. I've been to, well, you mentioned New York, the New York Public Library. I adore Patience and Fortitude, the lions at the front. And anytime I'm in the States, we're in New York, I always go. And it's been quite a few years now, and it'll be a few years till we go again. But I love that library so much, and they do really good work there. I will never be able to look at NYPL though. I was at a book convention a few years back, and the author Walter Mosley referred to it as the nipple, and now I can't not refer to it as the nipple. So anyway, there's that. I was lucky enough to get to the Library of Congress and do a tour there, and that is a stunning space. Oh my goodness, it was so beautiful. But there is one library that I have not been to that I really, really want to go to, and everyone who's gone says it's amazing. And Doc 1, which is a library in Aarhus in Denmark. And yeah, I'm just desperate to get over there. So that's my dream library to go visit next. We'll see when that actually happens. But there's so many great libraries in the world. We were in Mexico City way back when, and walking around, just taking in the sights. And there was this little, I think it was an old church, and it had these beautiful frescoes, and it was this tiny little space, and it was actually a library on the inside, and we needed to use a computer. So we went in and we were able to use a computer. And I just love that libraries are that sort of space around the world. Yeah.
You mentioned that, librarians travel and they go to libraries still. I think, well, I don't know about other museum workers, but that's what I do. I travel. People, I think some people find this odd that you already work in a museum. You're in a museum every day. You travel and then you still go to museum. Why? Like, it's a happy place for me, and I guess it's the same for a lot of librarians. And you mentioned that the Kathleen Syme, it's a beautiful library, but you've also mentioned that you worked at the library at the docks in, that's another one. That's
Yeah,
wow.
it is a
Yeah,
pretty well library, that one. Yeah, I was very, very lucky. I love that library, but
you.
yeah, it was purpose-built, and the community were consulted extensively, and they wanted an elegant space. They really wanted a library, but they wanted it to be elegant. And it's on the water, and it's actually made of cross-laminated timber. I think it was one of the first public buildings to use that process in Australia. And it was like a 6-star rated sustainability. Like it's a stunning space. I do love going there. Docklands is just not my favorite place though. So I much prefer Kathleen Syme Library in Carlton. Lygon Street, it's fun. And the building there, I like a bit of history too in my buildings. I'm a bit, maybe that's the local history librarian in me still, I don't know. But
Kathleen Syme has that staircase with the window, with with glass window. I love that corner. It's near University of Melbourne, so I go there, and they have community spaces as well, and we used to hold activities there. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about how you hinted at this. Let's talk about how your work has changed during the pandemic.
sure. Do you want to quickly answer that question? If you could get locked inside a library for 24 hours, which one would it be? I'll
Yes,
I'll tell you, it'd be the very specifically the Toronto library, but the Merrill collection in the Toronto Public Library. It's a science fiction, speculative fiction, and fantasy collection, which is my very first genre love. And if I had to be locked in a library, I would want to be in a space where I could read old favorites, but also find new ones. So that I've been there, I've visited them, and they are just, it's a lovely little space. So I would want to be locked in there. But anyway, I just wanted to get that out there.
oh, let's talk about how life has changed, how your work has changed during the pandemic.
It has changed a fair bit. So Melbourne stage 4 restrictions means that I'm working from home pretty much 100% of the time. We can leave the house for a few limited reasons, obviously, and wearing a mask. Most days I don't go outside at all. I have a little backyard. It's concrete, but it's still outside. So if I need to go outside, get some fresh air, I'll do that. Put the bins out the front or something. But in terms of going to work, it's not happening at the moment. Thursday, I was actually able to go out and visit one of the branches, not mine. But we are being asked to do security checks now once a week. But you can only go, once you go to that branch, that's it, you're locked in, because they don't want you going to multiple locations, which is fair enough. And you have to have a permit and all the legalities and wearing the PPE and the masks, etc. But that was really nice actually to be, I went to the Ascot Vale Library, which is the other close library to me within my 5Ks as well. So yeah, that was really lovely to actually be in a workspace. And I did have a Zoom meeting that I could do there, which was really nice as well. And yeah, it felt really good to get out and actually, not just wear active wear on the bottoms and, all of that. But I am basically, just working from home, which is a huge change. As a public library, we're a front-facing service delivery style organisation. Our purpose is to support our community's needs. And we've done that through very traditional manners, usually through our physical spaces. Now we have to figure out how we can do our jobs and support our community without that. We had to stop posting the books to people, as I mentioned, that we were doing. And so that was a huge blow, because that felt like something that we were able to continue doing that was almost like what we were used to. So we're really just trying to find and think of other ways to reach out and support our community. I miss the water cooler conversations. I miss those incidental chats which help you develop an idea or find a solution to a problem. It's really hard to do that. I miss the face-to-face interactions, which Zoom cannot replace. I miss the patrons coming in. I miss people. I'm getting very sick of online meetings, although this is a joy, so don't worry about that. And working on a spreadsheet, I found, is much harder on a little laptop screen than it is on my desktop. So that's been a huge I have a lot of spreadsheets to deal with. So yeah, that's been a bit of a thing. But what I have really enjoyed is how we've been able to transition most of our programs into the digital space. And we've also come up with some great new programs, which we would never have done if this hadn't happened, if this hadn't forced us. We'd been talking about recording our author talks, but we just hadn't done it. It was a bit too hard at the time and it just kept getting pushed off. But now that's what we're doing. We're only doing them online. So of course we're recording them. We also have a podcast now, which I didn't do it, but one of my staff was inspired by me, thank goodness, because it's great. It's called Read Now, and you can find it through most podcast platforms. Give a little plug. But because she had the time and a desire to reach out to the community in a different way and an interest, we have a podcast now, which is great. So yeah, we've just got to look at ways now where we can connect with people who are less tech savvy, maybe, or people who don't want to stare at a screen all day. Looking at a bunch of different programs, including good old-fashioned pen pal programs. The phone calls, obviously, that library service doing that already means that we might be able to do that too. I don't have the facility admin, so I don't have to worry about flickering lights or heating or, cleaning or any of that sort of stuff. So that's really good. It gives me a bit more time. But now I have to do so much more people management because it's so much harder when you can't see people, when you can't read body language as easily. And the mental load we're all carrying is so significant. So managing staff wellbeing on top of my own is a lot more that I would normally have to do now. So yeah, there's a lot of little changes that add up to some really significant changes.
Yeah. That's also the hardest change for me, not being able to go physically to the museum and engage with real people. And I think at some point, Glam Chat was, born out of that frustration to see people, talk to people, get inspired by people, have ideas sparked because you're just casually talking to other people. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I started doing Glam Chats. And you've hinted about this, the difficulties of shifting from the pre-COVID into working from home, and the whole impact of the pandemic to the community, to the GLAM community. What do you feel is one of the biggest challenge in this new situation that we are in?
Yeah, I mean, mental health, as I've just said, is a huge, huge challenge right now. It's my cat. She's going to have a nap now, I think. It's my job to keep my team focused and supported, but that is just so hard when you're not seeing them every day. And there are some who can't wait to get back to the library space, and there are some who are really, really concerned. And we reopened for a month in June, and the last restrictions eased, and that was not good. Look, it went well enough for us not really knowing what was going to happen and how it was going to look. And we tried to plan, but when you're planning for the unknowable, it was really, really tough. And I took a lot of the brunt of the staff, my staff, of their worries and their concerns. That's my job. That's fine. But I have to then be aware of my own mental health as well, because I invest a lot in them. And when they're sad or miserable or terrified, that's not great for me either. So yeah, reopening mental health of the staff, that's going to be a huge challenge. We talk a lot about our adaptability. One library manager I had at Melbourne who was brilliant, she talked about hiring people who could work in the grey, in that space of unknowing. But honestly, I think there are limits to how long people can stay mentally healthy in that kind of limbo state. So yeah, and I mentioned also another challenge is engaging the community. That's my job. That's actually in my job title, community engagement, customer engagement. But how do you do that in an online space? Okay, we're doing programs, we've got our social media. What about the people that aren't actually online? What about those vulnerable people? What about those elderly people? What about people, that literally can't afford internet? There's just, how do I reach out to them? What do we do? So that's another challenge for me to figure out. But I do feel like it used to just be one or two staff members' jobs, this sort of outreach idea, but now it's pretty much everybody's job because it's the only way we can do anything. So that's kind of nice to think about as well. End on a positive.
I think it's really important. We've mentioned this. Most GLAM institutions are community hubs, and we can't take care of our community if we don't take care of the people who are, supposed to do their jobs as part of that, hub. And so I think here in Victoria or in Australia or most first world country, developed countries are fortunate because there are resources, support in place. There's a number you can call. There you part of there are professionals that are doing counseling on the phone, on the internet, online, and there are just systems in place to support. But in a lot of developing countries, and I'm talking about, my colleagues in the Philippines that are overwhelmed, they're struggling in general about what's going on in the Philippines, and there are not a lot of assistance offered for taking care of the mental health. So that's a really the downside of all this. But let's not end in a very gloomy topic. Let's talk about what you see. You've already talked about it. A lot of things about transitioning to more digital space and more in embarking on ways to engage the public more fully. What else do you see is a silver lining to this tremendously damaging, impacting, challenging time for GLAM industry?
Time for those projects we had put off or we thought weren't quite so important. I know this will sound almost a bit ridiculous and it is very tedious, but my workplace is taking some of this time right now to get our document management framework consistent and up to date. It's one of the last things you think of doing or want to do, but it is quite important for a lot of reasons, inducting new staff, also just to find documents that you need when you need them. And now we actually have the time to do it. So just having time is a bit of a silver lining. Time to investigate all those wonderful ideas for programs and events in an online world. So when things are, normal, when you're going about the job that's existed in a very traditional sense for a long time, you don't really have the capacity to think outside the box as often or as easily. But now we have a lot of time to do that. We have a lot of online space to do the research as well. So, that's part of what I ask myself to do when you're working from home and you're doing some research into programs. Go online and see what other people are doing. See what they're doing in the Philippines. See what they're doing in America. See what they're doing in England, in Denmark, wherever. See what they're doing. It doesn't even have to be libraries. Again, look at the sector. Hell, look at the pubs that are running online trivia nights when they're closed and see if we can borrow that model. I don't care where you get your ideas from, but this is the time to actually be able to do that kind of research and investigate. And I'm not sure if this is a silver lining or not, but I do think now gives us a bit of time and a chance to interrogate our institutions a little. Why are some councils standing down staff? How can we better show our leadership groups that our value lies less in our cost and more in our contribution to the community? COVID recovery is going to rely so much on investment in community and social services, and we're better to start than public libraries. I don't have the answers to these questions, by the way, but I do think it's important to ask the questions and have the conversations. And this is a space where we have the time and we're thinking about these things now. So hopefully we can find a way through all this that sees us come out on the other side with a greater understanding of our capacity, our direction, and our worth. And I get to work with my cats, my beautiful little kittens and their mother and daughter. So that's a silver lining as well. That's a good one for me. There they are. Raya with her bowie eyes, and Hera, my little kitten, it's her daughter. Raya's the mother. So yeah.
I didn't know that there are mother and child.
Yeah. Pardon?
Who's the mother?
White cat, Raya. She's the mother.
And she has different eye colors.
Yes, she does. She's a very special wizard cat. So yeah, having them, honestly, I love my partner, but the cats are really what's keeping me sane right now.
we do what we need to do to keep sane in this very strange world we currently live in. And thank you so much for spending time with us today. Um, just
Thanks for having
remove.
me.
Oh, what did I do? There. Navigating this platform is still quite tricky. So, Justine, thank you so much for sharing your time, your insights, your experience, and even your cats with us. It's
You're
been
very
it's been lovely catching up with you.
I
And
want Can I say, Ethel, I am so impressed that you have not just come up with this idea, but then you followed through and you're doing it brilliantly. And I am just incredibly impressed by you. So thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you just for doing this in the first place.
oh, thank you. You're most welcome. As I said, I was doing it for slightly selfish reasons in the beginning. I really just want to talk to people. And then I realized maybe other people also want to see or want to find out what people are talking about. And we talked about this earlier. I wanted to be live broadcast so that I don't have to do much work afterward. It gets uploaded, no editing for me. Not a lot of people would say yes to that because people tend to edit themselves, or so it's I'm so grateful to friends who have said yes, and we still have, and I have to flash this. So I still have three more. We're halfway done with the first set of Glam Chat. This is a strange time for Asia and the Philippines. We are talking to good friend Sarah Smith. She is based in Florida, so it will be broadcast in Melbourne at 11:30 p.m. on Tuesday and 9:30 p.m. in the Philippines, but morning in the US at 9:30 a.m. So it's going to be a bit strange, but see how we go. It's going to be recorded anyway, so it's going to be recorded and then immediately uploaded. So that makes my life a little bit easier. So thank you so much. And I enjoyed talking to you about a lot of things. And for all who are watching right now, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to tune in on Tuesday with Sarah if you can, if you want to stay up late. But for the meantime, do take care, stay safe. Remember to be kind to others, but also be kind to yourself. Bye.
Bye.